An old man collapses, and the world keeps walking. One teenager stops. He doesn't know it yet, but this moment will change his life forever. A dying man's last wish, a fortune no one expected, and a simple act of kindness, worth more than gold. The downtown train station pulsed with life. Commuters in suits rushed past fast food wrappers swirling on the floor, their faces blank, their eyes fixed on their own destinations. Ethan Carter, 17 years old, with worn sneakers and a threadbare hoodie, stood by the ticket machine, scrolling absently through his phone. He had just finished another exhausting shift at a grocery store across town and was too tired to think about anything except getting home. Through the noisy buzz of the crowd, a dull thud caught his attention. He looked up. Near the ticket booth, an old man had collapsed, his body crumpling awkwardly onto the cold floor. A battered leather hat rolled away from his hand. For a split second, Ethan froze. All around, people hesitated. Some glanced over their shoulders, others turned away, walking faster. Nobody stopped. Without thinking, Ethan shoved his phone into his pocket and ran toward the man. He dropped to his knees beside him. The old man, gray-haired, wrinkled, frail, was unconscious but breathing. His chest rose and fell in shallow gasps. His hands twitched slightly against the floor. "Sir? Can you hear me?" Ethan said, his voice louder than he meant. No response. Ethan scanned the crowd. Hundreds of eyes slid past him, uncomfortable, unwilling to get involved. Some stared for a second too long before pretending they hadn't seen anything at all. Anger flared in his chest. He pulled out his phone and immediately called 911, voice steady despite the adrenaline rushing through him. "There's a man collapsed at Central Station. He's breathing but unconscious. I'm with him now. Please hurry." The operator told him to stay on the line and keep the man still. Ethan slipped off his hoodie, folded it into a makeshift pillow, and gently placed it under the old man's head. He crouched low, shielding the frail body from the stampeding feet around them. "You're okay, sir. Help's coming," Ethan murmured, even though he wasn't sure the man could hear him. The old man's hand shifted weakly, fingers brushing against Ethan's wrist. It wasn't a strong grip, but Ethan felt it. A simple, desperate connection. Minutes passed like hours. Announcements echoed overhead and trains roared into the station, sending gusts of dirty air swirling through the crowd. Ethan stayed where he was, unmoving. Finally, the shriek of approaching sirens cut through the din. 2 paramedics sprinted through the crowd, pushing a stretcher. Ethan backed up just enough to let them through, but didn't leave. He watched as they checked vitals, started oxygen, and prepared to move the man. "You did good, kid," one of the paramedics said over his shoulder. As they lifted the old man onto the stretcher, something remarkable happened. Through half-lidded eyes, the old man reached out, grasping blindly, and found Ethan's hand again. Weakly, barely above a whisper, he said, "Thank you for seeing me." Before Ethan could answer, the stretcher disappeared into the ambulance, its doors slamming shut with a heavy metallic thud. The paramedics pulled away. The station's noise returned, loud and impersonal as ever. Ethan stood alone in the middle of the platform, hoodie missing, palms dirty from the floor, heart hammering against his ribs, not realizing yet that nothing about his life would ever be the same again. Ethan stood frozen for a long second, staring after the flashing ambulance lights as they disappeared into the traffic. The station around him moved on without missing a beat. People announcing delays, arguing over coffee orders, rushing to catch trains. No one cared, except him. He shifted his weight, feeling awkward and exposed in the middle of the platform. Then he made a decision. He jogged to the nearest map board, located the nearest hospital, and took the next train going that direction. The ride was short but tense. Ethan sat near the window, hunched over, trying to replay every moment in his head. Had he done enough? Had he hurt the old man by moving him? What if he had made things worse? 20 minutes later, he walked through the sliding glass doors of County General Hospital. The place smelled of disinfectant and stale coffee. Nurses hurried past with clipboards. Overhead, a soft voice called out codes and room numbers. Ethan approached the front desk, nerves knotting his stomach. Hi. There was a man brought in from the central station. An older man. He collapsed. I called it in. The nurse, a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and a tired expression, barely looked up from her screen. Are you family? No. I just helped him. Then you'll have to wait. She motioned him toward a cluster of chairs by the wall. Ethan sat. The plastic chair was cold and unforgiving. He glanced at the clock. 7:14 p.m. Then at the doors leading deeper into the hospital. Closed. No information. No answers. Time dragged. 10 minutes, 30, an hour. Other people came and went. Nurses called names he didn't recognize. Doctors leaned in to whisper to anxious families. But no one came for him. He thought about leaving. Maybe they didn't need him anymore. Maybe he was just getting in the way. But every time he stood up, ready to walk out, he remembered the old man's whisper. Thank you for seeing me. So he stayed. Finally, a young nurse with a clipboard approached. Are you Ethan Carter? He stood up too quickly, heart hammering. Yeah, that's me. Come with me, please. Someone asked for you. Ethan followed her down a narrow hallway, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. His footsteps echoed against the polished floors. At the end of the hall, she opened a door to a small private room. Inside, the old man lay hooked up to IV lines, a nasal cannula feeding him oxygen. He looked impossibly small under the thin blanket. Ethan lingered awkwardly in the doorway. I don't want to disturb him. The nurse gave a faint smile. He specifically asked for you before the surgery. She left, pulling the door nearly closed behind her. Ethan stepped closer. The man's eyes were closed now. His chest rose and fell steadily, but faintly. On the small table beside the bed was a pen and a crumpled sheet of hospital stationery. Words scribbled in shaky handwriting. A name. Ethan Carter. And next to it, something even stranger. A line reading, My chosen heir. Ethan's mouth went dry. He stared at the paper, at the frail old man, at the machines keeping him alive. He didn't understand what was happening yet. All he knew was that he couldn't leave now, not when this man had trusted him in a way no one else had. He pulled up a chair and sat down, prepared to wait through the night. The room smelled like antiseptic and something colder, like metal and plastic. Machines beeped softly, a steady rhythm against the heavy quiet. Ethan shifted in the hard chair next to the hospital bed, elbows on his knees, staring at the old man. He still didn't know his name. He still didn't understand why he was here. Nurses came and went in hushed movements, checking monitors, adjusting IV lines, speaking in low tones that Ethan could barely hear. No one asked him to leave. No one even questioned why a teenage boy was sitting vigil beside a stranger. The hours dragged. Around midnight, a doctor entered. Tall, middle-aged, his badge reading Dr. Patel. He checked the old man's chart without glancing at Ethan, then finally spoke. He's stable for now. Surgery was successful. Minor cardiac episode. Dr. Patel looked over his glasses, finally noticing Ethan's confusion. You're not family, are you? No, sir. I found him at the station. I called for help. Dr. Patel studied him for a moment, as if weighing what to say next. Well, he insisted before the surgery that you stay. Seems like you mattered to him. That doesn't happen every day. He scribbled something in the chart and left without another word. Ethan leaned back, exhaling slowly. It was hard to imagine he could matter this much to someone he didn't even know. He watched the old man's face, lined, sunken, peaceful in sleep, and wondered what kind of life he had lived. Where was his family? Why had no one else come? The chair dug into Ethan's spine, but he didn't move. Somewhere in the deep hours of the night, a nurse left a small cup of coffee on the side table without speaking. He accepted it with a nod. Time stretched and blurred. At 3:17 a.m., the door opened again. This time, it wasn't a nurse or a doctor. It was a man in a dark tailored suit, silver cufflinks glinting under the fluorescent lights, slick black shoes, an expensive watch. He carried a leather briefcase. His eyes immediately found Ethan and narrowed slightly. "You must be Ethan Carter," he said, voice clipped but not unkind. "I'm Mr. Lambert, Mr. Grayson's attorney." Ethan stood awkwardly. I just helped him. I'm not sure why I'm still here." Mr. Lambert smiled faintly, an expression that didn't quite reach his eyes. "You're here because Harold Grayson chose you, and because before they wheeled him into surgery, he changed his will." Ethan blinked. "His will? Why? I don't even know him." The lawyer set down the briefcase, clicking it open. Inside, neat folders, stamped papers. "Apparently," Lambert said slowly, "it wasn't about who you were. It was about what you did when no one else would." He handed Ethan a photocopy of the hastily scrawled hospital note, the signature shaky but legible, the words undeniable. "I leave everything to Ethan Carter. He saw me." Ethan gripped the paper tightly, his brain refusing to process it. "Everything?" he croaked out. "You mean like his stuff?" Lambert's smile finally softened into something real. His estate, his assets, his holdings. Harold Grayson was a very wealthy man. Ethan sank back into the chair, the room spinning slightly. Wealth? Inheritance? None of it made sense. He hadn't stayed with the old man for any reason except one. It was the right thing to do. Now, somehow, that single decision was pulling him into a world he couldn't even imagine. And it was only beginning. Morning light leaked through the hospital blinds, casting pale stripes across the linoleum floor. Ethan hadn't slept. He sat stiffly in the same chair, holding the copy of the hospital note like it might disappear if he let go. Mr. Lambert, Harold Grayson's attorney, stood by the window, speaking softly into his phone. His conversation was full of clipped legal terms Ethan didn't fully catch. Executor, transfer, trust account. When he finally hung up, Lambert turned back to Ethan, smoothing the front of his dark suit with a practiced hand. "You'll need to come with me," he said. "Where?" Ethan asked, voice raw from exhaustion. "Mr. Grayson's residence. There are things you need to see, and papers that require your signature." Ethan hesitated. He had school tomorrow. He had work the next evening. He had a life, small, messy, ordinary, and this didn't fit into it at all. But then he thought about the old man's hand, weak but determined, clinging to his. "Thank you for seeing me." Ethan nodded. Lambert drove a sleek black sedan. The leather seats smelled rich and clean, a world away from the bus rides Ethan usually took. He stared out the window as the city blurred by, silent. 20 minutes later, they pulled up to a gated property on the edge of town. Massive stone pillars framed the entrance. Beyond them, a sweeping driveway led up to an old colonial-style mansion, its white paint gleaming under the early sun. Ethan blinked. "This is his house?" "One of them," Lambert said simply. The gates creaked open, and they drove slowly up the circular path. The lawn was perfectly manicured. Ivy crawled up the side of the house like veins on a giant's hand. A housekeeper, an older woman in a pressed uniform, met them at the front door with a slight bow of her head. "Good morning, Mr. Lambert. Everything is ready inside." Inside, the house felt like a museum. Polished wood floors, massive oil paintings, glass cases full of books and artifacts Ethan didn't recognize. It didn't feel like a place where a lonely old man would live. It felt abandoned, despite its perfect upkeep. Lambert led him into a small, sunlit study. On the desk, neatly arranged, were 2 folders, one thick, one thin. "These," Lambert said, tapping the thick one, "detail Mr. Grayson's assets, properties, accounts, trusts, all now legally tied to you." He tapped the thinner one. "This is a personal letter. From him. For you." Ethan stared at the folder. His palms felt sweaty. Lambert placed a simple pen beside it. "You don't have to decide everything today, but you need to read his letter." Without another word, the lawyer stepped back, giving him space. Ethan picked up the thin folder, heart pounding. Inside was a single handwritten page, neat and steady, completely different from the shaky note at the hospital. "Dear Ethan, if you're reading this, then fate chose you as I hoped it would. I spent too long waiting for family who never came and friends who forgot I existed. In the end, kindness from a stranger mattered more than blood ever did. I saw myself in you, someone who noticed what others ignored. This isn't a reward. It's a trust. Take this life I leave behind and make something better from it. Harold Grayson." Ethan set the paper down carefully, his hands trembling. He wasn't just inheriting wealth. He was inheriting a hope, a responsibility, and somewhere deep in his chest, a fierce, scared, determined part of him knew he wouldn't let Harold down. The study was too quiet. Ethan sat frozen, the letter still in his hand, the weight of it heavier than anything he had ever held. Mr. Lambert remained silent, giving him time. The ticking of an old grandfather clock filled the space between them. Finally, Ethan broke the silence. "Why me?" he asked, voice low. Lambert stepped forward and opened the thicker folder. He pulled out a set of documents, deeds, financial records, investment portfolios, the cold, hard proof of Harold Grayson's wealth. "Mr. Grayson," Lambert said, "had no living heirs. His wife died decades ago. His son, well, they were estranged long before his passing." He tapped the letter again. In the end, he didn't want his fortune eaten by lawyers or seized by the state. He wanted it to mean something. He wanted it to find someone worthy. Ethan shook his head slowly. "But I didn't do anything. I just stayed with him." "Exactly," Lambert said. "When everyone else walked away, you stayed." Lambert turned the page, revealing a list of Harold's holdings: 3 properties, several business investments, a trust account totaling over $18 million. Ethan's vision blurred for a second. He had never seen $18,000 in his life, much less $18 million. Lambert continued, his tone steady. "Mr. Grayson left it all to you under one condition. You must complete high school, and you must meet once a month with a financial advisor for 2 years. Until then, a trustee will assist you. After that, full control is yours." Ethan gripped the edge of the desk to stay upright. I'm not qualified for this," he stammered. Lambert smiled thinly. "No one ever is at first, but Harold believed you could become the kind of man who wouldn't waste it." Ethan turned back to the letter, reading the final line again. "Take this life I leave behind and make something better from it." It didn't feel real. He thought of his cracked phone screen, of the second-hand clothes hanging in his tiny bedroom, of the part-time job where his boss yelled if he took too long mopping. And now, this. He wasn't just inheriting money. He was inheriting a second chance, a life he hadn't even dared to dream of. Ethan looked up at Lambert, his voice steadier now. "What do I have to do first?" Lambert's smile widened just slightly. "You live, you learn, and when you're ready, you lead." Ethan nodded slowly, the full weight of it settling on his shoulders. The world he knew was gone. Before him stood a door to something bigger, scarier, and far more important than anything he had ever imagined. And ready or not, he was already stepping through it. The news broke faster than Ethan could prepare for. It started small, a local online article. Teen saves man at train station, inherits fortune. By noon, bigger outlets picked it up. By evening, Ethan's name and blurry pictures from the hospital lobby were everywhere. News sites, social media, even TV headlines rolling across the bottom of screens. Ethan Carter, 17 years old, from nowhere special, now worth $18 million. He sat in his tiny kitchen, the same one with the squeaky faucet and the cracked tiles, staring at the TV as a news anchor smiled too brightly. Kindness pays off, it seems. But who is Ethan Carter? He wanted to turn it off. He didn't. He couldn't. His phone buzzed nonstop. Numbers he didn't recognize, messages from people he barely remembered from school, distant relatives he hadn't seen in years. "Hey man, remember me? We were friends in 3rd grade. Cousin Ethan, I always knew you'd do great things." His inbox flooded. His social media exploded with friend requests. Within hours, Ethan wasn't a person anymore. He was a headline, a public curiosity. The next day, reporters camped outside the school parking lot. Cameras flashed as he walked in, backpack slung low, hoodie pulled up over his head. Classmates who had never spoken to him suddenly waved and smiled. Some whispered behind his back, pointing. "That's him. The rich kid. Lucky freak." In English class, his teacher paused mid-lecture to awkwardly congratulate him. In the hallway, a group of popular seniors he barely knew clapped him on the back like they'd been lifelong friends. It didn't feel like admiration. It felt like a trap. Ethan kept his head down, shoulders hunched. The weight of the money wasn't in his wallet. It was on his back, pressing heavier with every stare. When he got home, 2 more envelopes were stuffed in the mailbox. One from a charity asking for donations, another from a law office he'd never heard of, suggesting consultation services for sudden wealth. Inside, Mr. Lambert waited at the kitchen table, calm and composed as always. "It's starting," he said simply. Ethan dropped his backpack with a thud. "What do I do?" Lambert folded his hands neatly. "First, you stay quiet. You stay smart. And you remember, not everyone reaching for you wants to lift you up." Ethan slumped into a chair, feeling smaller than ever. He thought of Harold Grayson, the man who had lived with millions yet died almost alone, and understood, just a little, how easily wealth could build walls instead of bridges. The fortune hadn't made his life easier. It had painted a target on his back, and the real test was only beginning. The storm didn't let up. By the end of the week, Ethan's face was everywhere. News vans lined the curb outside his house. Neighbors he'd never spoken to dropped by just to check in. Emails poured in by the hundreds, charities pleading for help, businesses offering exclusive investment opportunities, influencers asking for collaborations. Everyone wanted something. And for the first time in his life, Ethan realized kindness could be twisted, stretched and pulled until it didn't look like kindness at all. He stayed holed up inside, blinds drawn, ignoring calls. He barely slept, barely ate, Mr. Lambert came every morning with folders of requests, offers, threats masked as friendly suggestions. "You can't hide forever," Lambert said, sipping black coffee. "Sooner or later, you'll have to decide who you want to be." That night, Ethan sat alone at the small kitchen table, Harold Grayson's letter in front of him. "Take this life I leave behind and make something better from it." The words blurred under his tired eyes. Better, not richer, not more famous. Better. Somewhere deep inside, Ethan knew he hadn't been chosen because he was smart, or special, or lucky. He was chosen because he had stayed when everyone else kept walking. That was who he was. The next morning, Ethan called a press conference. The station parking lot overflowed with reporters, cameras flashing wildly as he stepped up to the microphone, wearing his old hoodie, his scuffed sneakers. Nothing flashy, nothing rehearsed. He cleared his throat, voice steady despite the knots in his stomach. "I didn't ask for this money. I didn't help Mr. Grayson because I wanted anything from him. I helped because it was the right thing to do. And now, I want to use what he gave me the right way." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. "Starting today, I'm setting up the Harold Grayson Foundation to help seniors who are alone and teenagers who don't have anyone to believe in them." He looked up, meeting the cameras head-on. "This money isn't mine. It's a second chance, and I'm going to spend the rest of my life giving that chance to others." The flashes exploded again, louder this time. But Ethan didn't flinch. For the first time since that day at the station, he felt steady, grounded. He wasn't just the boy who had inherited millions. He was the boy who had inherited a promise, and he wasn't going to break it. 1 year later, Ethan stood in front of a new building, its brick walls clean and shining under the spring sun. A banner stretched across the entrance. "The Harold Grayson Foundation, opening day." The crowd was smaller than the media frenzy a year ago. Real people this time. Families, seniors, kids in worn jackets, their eyes wide with hope. No reporters shouting his name, no flashing cameras blinding him. Just quiet anticipation. Ethan tugged at the sleeves of his fitted blazer, a gift from Mr. Lambert, and stepped onto the small stage built under a rented canopy. He took a breath, feeling the steady weight of the moment. 1 year ago, he began, I stopped for a stranger when the world kept walking. His voice carried clear across the crowd. That moment changed my life, and today, I hope this place can change others' lives too. He looked out across the courtyard at the faces turned toward him, some curious, some cautious, some smiling faintly. This center is for those who feel invisible, for anyone who's been left behind. You are seen, you are not forgotten, and you are not alone. A few people in the crowd wiped at their eyes. Ethan's chest tightened, but he kept his voice steady. He stepped down as quiet applause rose up, sincere and powerful. Inside, the building was everything Harold Grayson would have wanted. A free clinic on the first floor, a library and study rooms for teens on the second. A common space upstairs where seniors and kids could meet, talk, share meals. Walls decorated with framed photos. Smiling strangers, new friends, second chances captured forever. At the center of the lobby stood a bronze plaque. Ethan approached it now, fingertips brushing the smooth surface. The inscription read, "One act of kindness can change a life forever." Below it, Harold Grayson's name, and Ethan Carter's, side by side. Ethan stood still for a moment, feeling the weight of everything behind him. The station, the hospital, the storm of fame, and everything ahead. This was the life he had been trusted to build. This was the future Harold had believed in when no one else had. And as the first kids pushed through the doors, laughing and jostling, and an elderly man shook his hand with tears in his eyes, Ethan realized something simple but true. Harold hadn't just saved him with a fortune. He had saved him with a purpose. And Ethan wasn't just living a dream. He was building one every single day.